Exactly 4 years ago, John McAfee was found hanging in a Spanish prison cell just hours after a court approved his extradition to the United States. They ruled it a suicide. But the man in this cell, who had flown drones over Epstein Island and hacked an entire government network which exposed one of the biggest corruption data leaks.
And so I donated to many secretaries within the government laptop computers preloaded with viral spyware.
Had sworn on camera and in posts, I quote, "If I'm ever found dead, it was not suicide. I was silenced for what I knew." Of course, there's the side of his excessive drug use and paranoia that could explain that, but isn't it weird how the one person that exposed proof of elite protected trafficking rings, government corruption, and a cover-up that links directly to the death of Jeffrey Epstein was found dead only a few hours after his verdict and before activating his dead man switch? Which, by the way, contained over 31 terabytes of files naming CIA agents and Bohemian officials. Isn't all of that weird? No, because McAfee had become too dangerous for them. And it was in his compound in Belize in 2012 where he officially became a target by doing something that intelligence agencies feared the most. He donated laptops to the Belizean police and government officials, which seemed generous at first, except every single machine had replicating keylogging spyware installed. So every email, password, and every file those officials touched, McAfee gained full access to. And what he uncovered was staggering. In interviews with Slatshot and SiliconANGLE, he revealed the data exposed rampant corruption across every level of the Belizean state. Drug trafficking networks protected by senior officials, human and sex trafficking operations, murder-for-hire contracts, illegal passport sales to operatives linked to Hezbollah, and cartel protection rackets running through the police force. His exact words? "My problem with the government is not drugs, but the fact that I uncovered rampant corruption of all kinds." And here's where things got worse. McAfee didn't frame this as a local problem. He explicitly described Belize as a microcosm, a tiny window into elite protected trafficking rings that reach directly into the corridors of US politicians and intelligence agencies. He was saying out loud what nobody in power wanted the public to connect. That the same networks operating in this small Central American country were the same networks connected to the people at the very top. So when his neighbor Gregory Fall turned up dead with a bullet in the back of his head in November and McAfee was named a person of interest, he didn't just flee. He went to the press immediately and told ABC News on camera that he was being framed by a corrupt government. His exact words, "I insist that we are living in a corrupt government." He said the murder charge was retaliation for what his spyware had uncovered. Only weeks before, he had kept around a dozen dogs on his property, which supposedly barked constantly. His neighbor was a 52-year-old American contractor named Gregory Fall, and he had enough. Fall filed a formal complaint and confronted McAfee in person, which he responded by cycling a shotgun and telling him to get off his property. And then, one morning, McAfee found 4 of his dogs lying dead, poisoned. According to court testimony, McAfee then shot the remaining dogs himself and began parading up and down the beach screaming. The exact next day, Gregory Fall was found in his home with a single bullet wound to the back of his head. Police obviously named McAfee a person of interest in the killing, but he didn't go in for questioning. Instead, he hid and literally buried himself in the sand on the beach with a cardboard box over his head.
I have had an adventure from hell, I want to tell you that right now, sir. Lying in the bottom of cabs, boats, you name it.
And then he fled. He crossed the border into Guatemala illegally, was arrested there, then faked a heart attack so convincingly that he was rushed to a hospital, and eventually deported back to the United States. And instead of going quiet, he did the opposite. McAfee became more public than ever before and ran for president of the United States twice. In 2016 through the Libertarian Party and then again in 2020. And he gave interviews to anyone who would listen. Joe Rogan, Fox News and ABC. and claimed to possess inside knowledge about corruption at the highest level of government. He publicly accused the CIA of surveillance overreach by having embedded operatives inside Silicon Valley companies as software engineers who were quietly building backdoors into the systems millions of people used every day. And he tied all of it back to the same networks he uncovered in Belize: the trafficking, the cartels, and the protected elites. All of this broadcasted to nearly 1 million followers on Twitter, constantly, sometimes multiple times a day, and he even tweeted openly that he had collected files on government corruption and that he was going to start naming names, including a specific CIA agent involved in criminal activity and officials in the Bahamas. Then came July 2019. Jeffrey Epstein's arrest for sex trafficking and conspiracy. And almost immediately, mysterious drone footage of his private island, Little St. James, began surfacing online. The footage showed construction activity, hidden structures, and signs of rapid cleanup. McAfee was the prime suspect behind these flights and teased openly in a New York interview that Epstein had surveillance gear all over that island and that it wouldn't be beyond belief to think that he kept recordings of everyone who visited. Think about what he was implying. Epstein had recordings and footage of the most powerful people on Earth doing things they could never allow to become public, and McAfee was hinting on record that he might have copies. He was connecting his own data trove to the Epstein cover-up in real time, publicly linking corrupt governments, intelligence agencies, and trafficking networks into one giant web. And he was doing it with 1 million people watching. And that's when it clicked for him. In January, McAfee announced he was now gonna be living in exile on a boat. He also told reporters he hadn't filed taxes in 8 years, had no intention of ever doing so, and invited the IRS to come find him.
I have not paid taxes for 8 years. I've made no secret of it. I have not filed returns. Every year I tell the IRS, I'm not filing a return. I have no intention of doing so. Come and find me.
The chase was on. He sailed to the Bahamas, where customs confiscated 17 of his guns, then to Cuba, where he docked his yacht and offered to help the Cuban government use crypto to circumvent the US trade embargo, and finally to the Dominican Republic, where he was detained after authorities found high-caliber weapons and ammunition on board, and his yacht was seized. But he was released days later, grinning in photos with Dominican law enforcement. Each time they tried to cage him, he slipped away. Then came August 2019, with news that Epstein was found dead in his cell, and McAfee went nuts. He posted his own Mavic drone footage and publicly accused Epstein's cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione, of carrying out the murder, claiming the guards were bribed and the records were falsified. By July 2020, he was still hammering the point, tweeting to the world that there was physical visual proof and implying, as he had for over a year, that he had access to it. McAfee was daring the most powerful institutions on Earth to come after him while simultaneously telling the world that if anything happened to him, the blood was on their hands. And they were listening. In October 2020, the Department of Justice indicted McAfee on tax evasion charges, alleging he had earned millions from cryptocurrency promotion, consulting work, and selling the rights to his life story, while never filing a return. The charges carried up to 30 years in prison. And for a 75-year-old man, that was a death sentence in all but name. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on his side. That same month, McAfee was arrested at Barcelona's international airport just as he was about to board a flight to Istanbul. They locked him up in Bryans II Penitentiary in Catalonia, and there he would stay for the next 8 months while extradition proceedings dragged on. From inside his cell, he kept tweeting, and on October 15, 2020, he posted a message that would turn his entire case upside down. I am content in here. I have friends, the food is good, all is well. Know that if I hang myself, a la Epstein, it will be no fault of mine. This wasn't just about warning the public. He was drawing a direct line between himself and the most suspicious prison death in modern history. McAfee was saying, "They did it to Epstein and they are going to do it to me." His wife Janice backed all of those claims and wrote publicly that the US authorities were determined to have John die in prison to make an example out of him for speaking out against the corruption within the government agencies. She said he was deteriorating mentally, physically, and financially, but he was not suicidal. Although things were about to change, as his final tweet posted on June 16, 1 week before his death, was reading, "My remaining assets were all seized. My friends evaporated through fear of association, and I have nothing left. Yet, I regret nothing." On June 23rd, 2021, Spain's National Court announced it had approved McAfee's extradition to the United States. The ruling meant he would be sent back to face charges that could keep him locked away for the rest of his life. Although he still had the right to appeal and the final decision still needed approval from Spain's cabinet. But for the people who wanted McAfee silenced, the clock had just started ticking. Why? Because extradition meant a courtroom, and a courtroom meant testimony, and testimony meant everything he knew could finally enter the public record. Hours later, guards found him hanging in his cell all by himself, while his cellmate supposedly had been out doing other activities. Prison medical staff attempted resuscitation, but failed. A statement from the Catalan Justice Department said, "Everything points to death by suicide." McAfee died at the age of 75. The man who tattooed a warning on his own body, who told the world 100 times that if this ever happened to him, it wasn't by choice, was dead. Within minutes of the news breaking, someone posted a single letter on McAfee's Instagram account. The letter Q. The post was deleted shortly after, along with all the other photos on his account. Conspiracy theories erupted. His followers pointed to the tweets, the tattoo, the drone footage, the hacked government files, and the promises of a dead man switch that was supposed to release 31 terabytes of incriminating data on the world's most powerful people the instant he was gone. All of this was weird. His wife Janice spoke publicly within days, saying that the last time she'd spoken to him was just hours before his death, and that he showed absolutely no signs of being suicidal. So, was the dead man switch real? Were the 31 terabytes of files even more than a bluff? Or did someone find the switch before he died and made sure that data never saw the light of day? These are questions that may never be fully answered.